Maybe you have something in your house, just like I do, that is some sort of art project that is worth more to you than any Van Gogh, even if nobody would even want that as a white elephant gift, all right? So just a little warning, if you go into our bathroom, that if you're at our house and that's the bathroom you're going to use, you'll see some prized art in there. So something that every time I look at it, it's a little creepy. But anyway, but it's prized because of who created that. So a lot of times we generally value something because of the cost or because of a relationship. If you want to know which one carries a little bit more weight, let that person that you really, really care about get in an accident with that car that you really, really value and see which question is asked first. How's the car, or how are you? That'll probably demonstrate maybe who's more important at that point. But we've been looking in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and we just finished several things that Jesus said should be done in private, or in other words, things that we shouldn't be trying to draw attention to ourselves through while doing them, whether it was giving or praying or fasting. And Jesus is making a switch here, a couple different switches, but he's making a switch here to talk about some things that are easily, readily seen by those that are around you. And Jesus has been talking in terms of the religious leaders, the hypocrites, and the way in which they were approaching so many different things. And he is about to change to addressing not living not like the religious leaders, but actually like the Gentiles that were around them, those that were, as he would say, were desiring more of stuff, had this materialistic view on life. And I think at times we can identify with both groups, with those religious leaders, and more certainly within the secular society in which that we live. In fact, in America, in the world in which you and I identify with, it is becoming more and more irreligious. I don't have to try to convince you of that, but let me just share this. In 1972, there's a study that's been done over the last, I'm not quite sure how many years, I'm not sure when they started, but in 1972, I saw that the percentage was 90% of the people identified as Christian, and only 5% were religiously unaffiliated. Today that number is 63% as Christian and 29% as religiously unaffiliated. Now, granted, I'm just going to say this, that the numbers for who is a Christian are very generous in the study. The question in which they ask is a little vague, but instead of looking at the numbers specifically, look at the trends. And the trends are easy to see, that our world is becoming less Christian and more nuns, those that carry no affiliation with any religion. Then our world is being more and more driven by the nuns. Again, I saw in their research that it showed that Americans tend to develop firm, enduring political identities earlier than religious ones. And this is what blew me away a little bit more. Going on with the quote, and their political views may influence their religious beliefs more than the other way around. And you see, Jesus saw the influences of the Roman world upon those in which he was ministering to. And don't think that Israel here is just a religious one, because remember, there were tax collectors, right? And who did they do business with? Well, they did business with the Romans. So while we may look at Israel and we think, wow, this is just a very religious nation, trust me that it had the influences of both the religious and the secular right there. And there was just these competing values that were very apparent to Jesus, and obviously those values are still competing to this very day. And so Jesus says in Matthew 6:19 through 24, he says this, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. This then, the light within you is darkness. How great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." So Jesus lays out here for us this week, and we'll look a bit more at this even next week, but alternatives and how we can live. Kingdom living versus worldly living. And so let's just jump in and start breaking down some of this. He starts off in verse 19. He says, "Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal." Verse 20, "But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And so Jesus starts off with saying this. When it comes to living, whether for the kingdom or whether for worldly values, he's saying this, is that we ought to have, if we're going to live kingdom living, we ought to have a singular investment. That we ought to have a singular investment. He gives the alternatives there. Either you can live for treasure on earth, or you can live for treasure in heaven. We can tell what Jesus is specifically talking about here in his day with his comments about moths and vermin and thieves. Okay, in Jesus' day, wealth was related to basically, right, I'm sure other things, but three things, right? Whether it was garments, grain, or gold. Moths destroy clothes, vermin eat grain, thieves steal gold. All right, so that's how they determined what wealth was. Today, we kind of define wealth a bit differently, right? It's dollars, it's real estate, at times it's cars, it's stocks. I'm sure there's lots of other things, but things may be a bit different in what we consider is wealth from Jesus' day, but what hasn't changed is that our treasures at times can still be what? Easily removed. We like to think that it's a little bit more difficult in our day and age for that to be erased, but literally one real bad day on the stock market, and all of a sudden everybody feels a bit of the pinch, even if you don't even own any stocks. Of course, right now we're dealing with inflation, right, in our own world, and so even if you were able to hold on to everything that you have, it still isn't worth as much as it was yesterday because everything costs so much more. Yet our world chases after these things. And why do they chase after these things? They chase after them because they believe that they bring security and that they bring status. And so these things have great sway with just so many within our world. Security, that idea that if I just had enough money, then I wouldn't have to worry about anything. Or status, that the idea is if I have the right things, that people will think better of me, or at least they'll think of me, right? And our world chases after wealth, and since they don't need Jesus to tell them that wealth in its various forms is easily wiped away, reduced overnight, they pursue those things with great intensity. Long hours, multiple jobs, investment strategies, at times unscrupulous deals and practices, all in pursuit of the almighty dollar that they believe will give them security. And when it comes to trying to buy status, I really like what Dave Ramsey says. He says, "We buy things we don't need with money that we don't have to impress people we don't like." And so at times we try to accumulate things to try and impress people that are in our neighborhoods at times that we don't even know. Don't hear me saying, though, that Jesus says that it's wrong to acquire some wealth. All right, the Bible doesn't say that we can't have things in fact, it does say that you can own things, that you can save for the unexpected expenses of life, for your future. There's no reason biblically why you shouldn't have some life insurance. But even with all those things and all the things going on, Jesus says you should enjoy what you have. But then he goes on to say, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Now, we don't see this here, but there's a bit of a play on words in the original language here. It literally is saying, do not treasure your treasures. Okay, do not treasure your treasures. And so what he's saying here is this, it's don't hoard, right? What he's saying is we should forego the selfishness of accumulating for the sake of accumulating or stoking one's ego, especially when we see so many people around us with so many people that are within need. And so Jesus says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Now, he doesn't really point out to us here in our passage what exactly this is, but certainly it is anything that has lasting impact even into eternity, where moss, vermin, right, thieves can't affect. And so what are some temporal activities that we can do here on earth with some eternal consequences? Let me just rattle off a couple, right? You can develop Christ-like character, right? See the fruit of the Spirit, right? Walking in step with the Holy Spirit. You can increase your faith, your hope, your love, right? 1 Corinthians 13 says those three things are going to remain. Growth in our knowledge of God, right? Get a head start. All of eternity, we're going to be able to continue to grow in our knowledge of who God is when we get to heaven, right? There's going to be this time when, again, God is so much greater than we are that even throughout all eternity, we'll still be going, I didn't know that, right? We'll still be learning things. But why not get a head start right now? Praying and sharing to introduce others to Jesus so that they might have eternal life also. How important is it for us to be sharing our faith with those that are around us? Truly, that has eternal ramifications, that all of a sudden that a person moves from death to life, that a person moves from not having a relationship to having a relationship, that moves from having a destiny where they end up apart from God in hell to with God in heaven for eternity. And of course, listen, we can use our money then for what? For Christian causes, for what would have eternal benefits to those that are around us. So I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't invest your wealth wisely. I'm probably not the guy to help you do just that, right, based on my portfolio or lack thereof. But the most important investments that you and I will ever make will not concern our bank accounts. Because Jesus goes on to say, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Think about it with me. The most important investments probably are not going to be with your head, but they're going to be with your heart. Sometimes, oftentimes, really, our investments in the kingdom do not make any sense to those who are in our world or by those who are swayed by worldly values and thinking. I was telling some guys this week about a mentor that I had who worked for somebody who owned lots of McDonald's. I mean, lots of McDonald's. And he went to the owner after working there for so long and gaining complete trust of this owner, and just said to him, look, I'm going to have to quit. And the owner was like, well, why do you need to quit? He goes, because my job is really getting in the way of my Bible study. You ever heard somebody say that? Well, here's something that you probably haven't heard either. So the owner said, look, don't quit. Let me sell off some of my McDonald's and reduce the load of work upon you. Because he thought it was better to keep this guy than to keep some of his business. And as the story pans out, this happened time and time again until there was literally one McDonald's left. And the owner just came to him and said, listen, do you want this? And my friend said, nah, I don't think that's what I want to do either. And went off and did something else. And again, God blessed him in that as well. But that's something that we certainly don't hear very often in our world, one way or the other. I got in trouble in the very first church that I was at, which I'm sure surprises all of you, right, that I would get in trouble. But I got in trouble. This is what I got in trouble for spending time with a kid that I saw potential in. I know, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? It did to me. I was brand new into ministry. I'm like, well, what are we talking about? I shouldn't be spending time. And I was told, listen, this kid, he doesn't really come here that often. His parents haven't been coming here very often. In fact, his parents at that point were unfortunately, unbeknownst maybe to some, but were really struggling and would eventually get divorced. And so I forged ahead on my own time and continued to work with this kid. And I'll tell you what, as I did years later, here's at least the last I know of, that kid who's now I'm married, very nice job with kids. But anyway, he's a deacon at that church. And yet, for so many at that time, it didn't what? It didn't make much sense. Let me ask you a simple question here. And the question is this: what or who are you investing in? That's a pretty important question for us, right? What or who are we investing in? Treasures on earth? Treasures in heaven. Jesus goes on, though, and he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Again, we're talking about, are we living for the kingdom? Are we living for the world? And we've looked at a singular investment, and Jesus moves on to a singular vision, right? Moves from treasures to our sight. And again, we have two options. Will we see clearly, or will it be somewhat clouded, or maybe not even see at all? Joni, who is here with us this morning, and I asked permission, but Joni here regularly struggles, right, with her eyesight. And certainly she's done whatever she could through medical means to be able to help improve her eyesight. Why? Because while she can get around on her own some, and certainly on the arm of her loving husband, so much better, it's still, life is still easier. Life can still be at times better when we can see what? Clearly. I didn't used to wear glasses. So when I was 16, all of a sudden I realized I was getting headaches, and found out that, honestly, I think I had 20/20 vision at that time, but I had one eye that just didn't focus the way it was supposed to. So one lens was just completely glass, and the other lens had just a little bit of correction to help give some focus. Today, you'd have to hope that I had memorized the entire message, because I wouldn't be able to read this very well, right? But when Jesus talks about having healthy eyes, healthy here means to have a clear vision, to have singular vision. Jesus is saying that we need to be somebody who is singularly focused in devotion to Him, singularly focused in devotion to Him. You know what this word can also mean, though? And certainly does in this context, in so many others throughout the New Testament. But it also means to be generous, with the implication that when we see clearly, or our hearts are right, and our heart and eye, honestly, in the Bible so many times are interchangeable. But when our hearts, when our eye is right, that we will grow in our relationship with Jesus, knowing and obeying Him and delighting in Him. When Jesus talks about an unhealthy eye, the literal meaning for unhealthy is stingy. Stingy. Back in their day, the word was an expression at times used by the Jews that could mean give you the evil eye or the stink eye. Okay, I like that phrase, stink eye, right? And a person with a stink eye meant that they were selfish with their money, is what it meant. And so Jesus is saying this. Jesus is saying that a person who is materialistic and greedy, that will lead them to being spiritually blind. And so Jesus goes on to say, if then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? I mean, how great is that darkness? What he's saying is a person who lives this way, since it brings darkness, this person doesn't even know that what they're doing is wrong because they're living in so much darkness. And as my wife told me as we were leaving a hospital room one time after visiting with somebody, and the person was sharing all different kinds of what I thought were crazy facts. And I'm not a medical person, so I'm just rolling with the punches here. But my wife knows, right? She understood. And I just said to her, why didn't you say something to this lady? I mean, she was out there. And here's what my wife said, I'll never forget, and I've now applied this in my life in so many different ways, is you don't argue with crazy. Okay, so you don't argue with crazy. And a person who is in this kind of darkness, you can't argue with this person because it goes beyond reasoning, because it is a heart issue. It is a focus issue. And it will take more than just a good argument to change their lifestyle, their attitude, the way in which they are living. And so let me ask you a second question here this morning, and it's this, is how's your vision? How is your vision today? How clearly are you seeing the difference between the things of this world and the things of Christ? The things on earth and the things in heaven. How well is your eyesight this morning? Finally, in this section, we look at today, anyway, is Jesus says this: no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So we've seen Jesus say, hey, you need to have a singular investment. You need to have a singular vision. And now he was talking about having a singular service. And when we read this, don't think in terms of a boss, right? Don't think in terms of an employer. You know, you can have more than one job, and if you put in the time that you were supposed to put in there, accomplish those things, you've done what you're supposed to for that job, and you do the same thing at another job and put in the hours that you were supposed to be there and do the things that you were supposed to do. You know, you can please two bosses at the same time. But this is not talking about bosses or jobs. This is referring to a master, a slave relationship. That the master actually does what? He owns the slave. That everything that you have, everything that you even are, it belonged to the master. And who is our master? Well, it's not you. is the Lord Jesus Christ himself that owns us, right? That we have given our lives completely and fully to, that we would be his slave, his bond servant. And so we are bound to him. And so when we look through the lens of what the term master originally meant, Jesus leaves little room. Okay, Jesus actually leaves no room for who you can serve. Because Jesus is very emphatic here in this passage that no one can. He says, you can serve him alone or really not at all. You can choose to serve him alone or really not at all. And yet, we are used to, in this world, just trying to play at times even both sides, trying to keep the door cracked open, that we like to say that, hey, what is good for me today, maybe I'll want something different tomorrow, and so I'm gonna leave my options open here. In politics, we talk about walking across the aisle, working with somebody from the other party, and so many times that is a good thing, is a great thing, because they're trying to do something that benefits people from both viewpoints. But when it comes to Jesus, you can't walk across the aisle of this world. You can't keep one foot in the world and then expect to serve the Lord at the same time, because there is no common ground between the two. No common ground. And so Jesus says, you cannot serve both God and money. John Calvin said, where riches hold the dominion of the heart, God has lost his authority. Again, you cannot serve both God and money. One or the other will gain mastery over the other. So let me give you just one final question. And it's this, are you in service to money, material things, or in service alone to God? Which at times seems like that'd be an easy question for us to answer. And yet with all the influence that we have from the world, at times has become so clouded for all believers, especially here in the United States. I know this is the pursuit of the almighty dollar has shipwrecked more than one person, family. Our attitudes, our actions when it comes to money, they tell so much about us. It's a pretty good barometer of our spiritual condition or where our heart is. Right, growing up, I always remembered my pastor saying you could tell a lot about somebody from their checkbook. I don't use that phrase because I wrote one check in the last several months because everything's just done online or through a card. But you can tell a lot from somebody's statement for sure. 1 Timothy 6:6-8 says this, but godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. With all of the good things that there is about our country, certainly it does have its detractors as well. And a bent towards materialism is certainly a big detractor. For you and me as followers, disciples of Jesus Christ, may we choose to deal with our worldly goods in a Christ-like manner. May we spend, may we invest, may we use our money, our things on things that truly matter for all eternity. May we see clearly by being generous with what the Lord has given us. May we not allow wealth to get in the way of service to God, that which we should be giving to him wholeheartedly, our full self. And before anyone in here says, listen, I don't think that I'm wealthy, can I just say that the average person Just right up until COVID, I think it was the average person across our world lived on $2 a day, just over $2 a day. And now, because of everything that's going on, it's now underneath $2. Most people in our world live over $2 a day. And wherever you may choose to eat, whether it's at home or whether it's at a restaurant today as you leave here, your family is going to spend more than $2 a person just at that one meal alone. Each of us really, according to the worldly standards, are very wealthy. Matthew 16:26, though. Can I just leave us with a warning here this morning? And here's the warning. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Listen, if you're here today and you recognize how you've been putting your trust for your life in the wrong place, well, it's not too late today. You can release your faith in money, wealth, material things, thinking that those things would keep you safe and secure, and you can give your life to Jesus Christ. In Him alone can security be found, eternal security, something that can never be taken away from you. And right where you are seated today, or maybe listening on some sort of device, whatever day it may be, you can acknowledge, you can call out to God and acknowledge that you have missed the mark, that you have placed your trust in the wrong thing. Recognize that has separated you from God, and you can believe and place your trust in Jesus Christ alone for salvation, for a new life that is lived for Him, a life that is lived through Him. And honestly, if that's you here today or listening, don't listen to another word I have to say, but start talking to Him right now. If you're here this morning, though, and you recognize that as a follower of Jesus Christ, that you have drifted away from a kingdom living and towards worldly living, drifted into allowing money to control you, things to control you, instead of just allowing those things to be something that you are a steward of what God has given you, you can call out to Him right now, wherever you may be, and acknowledge how you've gotten off track, and ask God to cleanse you of any kind of attitude or thinking that has brought you into that place. And let Him know that you are renewing afresh your commitment to Him and His ways, and aligning your heart with His. And you can go ahead and start praying to the Lord right now.